I really do think that there's a huge amount that we don't know. And in the last few years, we've had particular institutions and beliefs that have been shown to be completely false. Politicians, governments, and healthcare systems, and even religious institutions, we've all seen them pull up the veil and say, ha ha, we were just fooling you. We don't actually give a flying fuck about you, your culture, your freedom, your well-being. And we've had this poured down our throats relentlessly since 2019, basically. And we've had it for, well, probably decades even before that. But before COVID and everything that went on, it was far more subtle. But the thing is now, they're not hiding. They're just, they're not hiding their intent, or, what some people might call ineptitude. I think it's fairly clear that they're on a collision course with the populace. And I don't think people are putting up with it quite as easily as they might have done in the past. And I had an interesting experience, that I talked about in my video yesterday, with a man who was incredibly angry, and in a totally disproportionate way. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The way that he reacted was violently angry almost. It was touch and go, frankly. But we seem to think it's a terrible thing to not know, to not have all of the answers. But the thing that I found out from my experience yesterday, very directly, I'd always thought this before, but this was a particularly specific example, is that we don't really venerate or support curious people that much. Curious people, they tip the apple cart, they put doubts in people's minds, and they do so very, very openly, very, very publicly, because people want to fit in. It's not a secret, it's not a surprise, but people continue to be surprised when particular people or functions in society don't turn out in the way that they do. And the thing is, I'm reading a series of books, and they're spiritual books. They're kind of about manifestation. They're certainly about spirituality and various aspects of history. And they're brilliantly written, I have to say. They're quite action-packed. They're page turners. They're very, very enthralling and immersive. Really enjoying it. And I'm at the end of the actual fiction series, and there are accompanying books. It's the Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. And the original book, the Celestine Prophecy, has been turned into a film. But they're all actually really, really fascinating. And they've got some quite practical advice for life in them as well, if you are of a spiritual bent. But because of their esoteric and what you might call woo-woo kind of nature, I have been resonating in a slightly different way, and vibrating, as people might say, in a different way. And what I found kind of funny was, in a recent video saying that I wanted to ruffle some feathers and be a fire starter, I wasn't quite ready for the pace of the manifestation to actually come. And of course, these experiences, they're not enjoyable particularly. They're unnerving. Well, I certainly found it unnerving yesterday, and I've still been sort of bringing myself back down to earth a little bit, and sort of wandering around the village, maybe slightly more cautiously, frankly. But I don't feel quite as I did yesterday. But it just made me think that, well, that bloke who was really angry and totally unnecessarily so, will have to live with that. And something tells me that he's not going to be letting go of it immediately or very quickly. And I certainly also know that that level of anger wasn't really to do with me. And I did explain this in the video yesterday, that I think that his living arrangements are probably not what he imagined for himself, frankly. It's my opinion, and it is guesswork. I will put my hands up and say that. But I think it's fairly accurate, frankly. But in being so hyperbolic and, you know, full of vitriol, I thought, what if we even put half of that level of energy towards something really, really positive? And I think what stops a lot of people is wanting to know all of the answers, wanting to have the permission to behave in particular ways. And the more that I progress and the more consistent I am in building the coaching business that I want to build, and in the future various other things, I know that I give less of a fuck than I would have done 6 months ago, a year ago, or even longer about that experience, because I can very easily recognize that we're living in completely upside down, inverted times, where black is white and white is black and war is peace, and you know, all of the things that powers that be are trying to convince us of, and we know that they're demonic and that they're not with the good of humanity in mind. Well, that man's reaction yesterday actually makes far more sense in a world where all traditional roles have been abandoned, where everything is a homogenous blur of, you know, diversity, inclusion and equity and all this crap that we are force-fed all day. We each have our individual lives. And imagine if we actually put our best foot forward and put our energy into the things that really matter. What could we actually achieve? And this is something else that we don't know. We do not know the full extent of our capability. We do not know what we could really achieve if we actually applied ourselves. And I scheduled a couple of tweets yesterday that went out early this morning, and each of them was a picture of a beautiful big house, one of them a local stately home, and another which is a castle actually in Germany, which is the setting for a computer game, Gabriel Knight, The Beast Within. And it is a real castle. The interior shots in the game aren't actually the real ones in this castle. But I just had these pictures and said, dream bigger. And do bigger, think bigger, and think of the possibilities that are literally on your doorstep, you know, that are so tantalizingly close. What would your life be like if you actually work towards those things and realize them, turn the dreams into reality? How powerful and fulfilled would you feel? And how inspirational would you be to the right people?